In the quiet cradle of a distant northern fjord, where pale mists rise from the sea each morning like wandering ghosts, a cry breaks the silence. Not a war cry, nor a call to the gods, but the tender, fragile wail of a newborn girl, nestled in straw, swaddled in coarse wool. She will never know the world of men, where swords sing and ships carve through salt waves. Her world is smaller, colder, and far more confined. The village around her is a cluster of thatched roofs, bound together by weather-worn timber and necessity. Life is harsh here, not in moments of drama, but in the ceaseless erosion of toil and tradition. Her mother, worn and stoic, wraps her with a fur that once belonged to a fox her husband trapped. No smile touches her lips. In this world, to give birth to a daughter is both a blessing and a burden. The child is named Sigrid, a name carried by other women before her, grandmothers who once stood at the loom or stirred the cauldron, whose faces are remembered only in snatches of song and half-whispered tales by the hearth. From the first breath she draws, Sigrid is already part of a long cycle. Her days will be measured not in triumphs, but in tasks: milking goats, weaving linen, preserving herring, tending wounds, and swallowing grief. For now, she sleeps, her tiny hands curled like shells. But the world around her moves without rest. Her birth is met with a simple ritual. An elder woman, known in the village as a wife of wisdom, mutters low words to the Norns, the three weavers of fate. She sprinkles water on the child's forehead and calls on Frigg to grant gentleness, on Freya to grant strength. There are no drums, no feasting hall to mark her arrival. Life simply continues. Firewood is chopped, fish are gutted, and the wind hums through the cracks of the longhouse walls. But even in her cradle, the weight of expectation begins to settle. Viking society, for all its fierceness and seafaring glory, carves deep divisions between man and woman. While boys are raised to raid and rule, girls are raised to endure, to bleed in silence, to bury the dead, to carry family and farm through seasons of snow and scarcity. And so, as the smoke from the hearth curls gently upward, Sigrid's story begins, not with a shout, but with a sigh. The first year is perilous. The north is no place for the frail. Sickness roams the air like a restless spirit. The smallest cough can bloom into fever, and the touch of frost can take a life in hours. But her mother is resolute. She chews herbs mixed with animal fat, pressing the pungent paste into Sigrid's gums when the fever rises. She sings low lullabies, songs of the sea and the stars, of gods who ride wolves and serpents who circle the world. When Sigrid is old enough to stand, she is taught to fear fire, to recognize the sharp smell of mold in grain, to stay clear of the rotting pier where old boats lean like tired giants. She learns which berries stain fingers with death and which roots bring calm sleep. She begins to follow her mother through the pasture and the shed, her small hands eager to mimic each movement. Winter is a long, muffled sorrow. The daylight slips away like a memory, and the nights stretch endlessly. During these months, Sigrid learns patience. She watches the women sew patterns into wool by the flicker of tallow candles. She listens to stories of brave shield maidens, of ghost walkers, and of women who tricked kings and survived storms. These stories bloom like embers in her heart, but she does not yet know they are not meant for her. One night, her mother presses a hand to her chest and says, "Life is cold, child, but the fire you build is yours to keep. It is not meant as comfort. It is instruction." When spring comes, Sigrid is 5, and her chores begin. She scatters grain for the chickens, gathers goose feathers for pillows that are rarely soft. She watches as the men sharpen blades and speak of distant shores. But her world remains close. The length of the field, the shadow of the house, the bend of her mother's back. Her father is not cruel, but distant. His world is one of trade and travel. His stories are salted with blood and silver. He brings her a carved comb once, smooth, cool bone shaped like a swan. She treasures it, even though it pulls painfully through her tangled hair. She learns to read faces more than words. A flicker in her mother's eye means silence. A sigh from her aunt means work undone. She begins to understand that women in this world are like the beams of the longhouse, strong, hidden, essential. They carry the weight, but are rarely praised. Sigrid is 7 when she witnesses her first funeral. A woman, old and kind, slips in the night from fever. The village gathers. Her body is burned with herbs and cloth. Sigrid watches the flames, her small hand held by her mother's. No tears are shed aloud. Mourning is private, tucked beneath the skin. The smell of smoke clings to their hair for days, and so her life unfolds, a quiet thread in the great tapestry of the North. Not glorious, not famed, but vital, and she will grow. She will change. She will suffer. But first, she must simply live. And in living, she will learn the many quiet hardships of being born, not just into the Viking age, but into womanhood within it. By the time Sigrid reaches her 9th winter, her hands are already calloused, her arms steady from hauling water, and her eyes sharper than most would expect of a child. Girlhood, in the land of the Norse, is a brief and silent thing, a passing, frost between the fire of childhood and the cold steel of womanhood. The snow this year is heavier, thicker upon the thatched roofs, and it silences the world with its weight. The longhouse grows dimmer, and the fire at its heart must be fed constantly, a hunger never satisfied. Inside, the women gather, mothers, daughters, grandmothers. Here, the loom sings its soft, rhythmic song. Sigrid is given her own small weaving frame. Her first cloth is crooked, the threads uneven. Her aunt laughs softly, not unkindly. Even the gods had to learn to weave fate, she says. So Sigrid tries again. Each morning, before the frost melts from the corners of the windows, she sets to her task. Under her breath, she hums the same lullabies her mother once sang. Outside, the men sharpen axes, prepare the sleds. The season for raids is months away, but preparation is endless. Sigrid hears the whispers of villages to the south, of gold hidden behind stone walls, of Christian lands ripe for plunder. These tales stir excitement in the boys. For Sigrid and the other girls, they are distant echoes, like the rumble of thunder behind the mountains. Yet violence is not absent from her world. She sees it in small things. The sharp tone between husband and wife, the red stain on a woman's dress as she tends the sheep, the sudden breathless silence when a child does not return from the woods. Life is fragile, and in every home, sorrow lingers just beneath the surface. One day, a neighbouring family arrives, bringing a girl named Astrid. She is 2 years older than Sigrid, with hair the colour of old honey and a quiet sadness in her eyes. Her father died at sea, they say. Her mother remarried a man who would not keep a stepdaughter. So Astrid has come to live with an aunt, and with Sigrid's family, she will share the chores. The two girls bond quickly, not with laughter or games, but with shared silence. They fetch water together, knead dough together, weave side by side. In the quiet hours, they speak of small dreams. Astrid wishes to see a town with stone streets. Sigrid, to learn healing from a vulva, a wise woman who walks the line between the world and the spirit. But dreams are dangerous things, especially for girls. They make the daily grind feel heavier, and the narrow path of duty harder to bear. By May, her 10th year, Sigrid is given her first blade. Not a warrior's sword, but a curved iron knife for carving meat, splitting reeds, and scraping hides. Her mother watches closely as she learns to keep the blade clean, sharp, respectful. A woman's knife is no less vital than a man's axe, she says. The blade becomes an extension of Sigrid's hand. It teaches her precision and patience. She begins to understand that strength for a woman is not measured in loud victories, but in quiet mastery of tools, of time, of tasks done right the first time. In the evenings, the women tell tales not found in the sagas sung by the skalds. These are not stories of heroes, but of clever wives who outwitted thieves, of daughters who hid silver from greedy brothers, of midwives who faced death to bring forth life. These stories, passed from tongue to ear in low voices, become the roots of Sigrid's understanding. Here is where her courage is born, not from the clang of battle, but from the softness of enduring. One evening, as snow lashes the wooden shutters, a visitor arrives, a trader, wrapped in sealskin, bearing goods from faraway lands. Among his wares are beads of blue glass, so clear they seem to hold the sky within them. Sigrid stares, transfixed. Her father buys 3, just 3, and gives 1 to Sigrid. "You've been diligent," he says, not quite smiling. She wears it on a cord around her neck, hidden beneath her woolen tunic. To others, it is just a trinket. But to Sigrid, it is proof that even the small can hold beauty, and that her efforts are seen, if only rarely. That spring, Astrid begins to change. She speaks less. Her eyes turn often to the men who pass through the village, especially the older ones. Sigrid does not understand at first, but her mother does. One evening, after the girls sleep, she speaks with Astrid's aunt in hushed, urgent tones. Soon after, Astrid is sent to stay with another family, farther inland. Sigrid's questions are met with silence. Only years later will she understand. Astrid was nearing her womanhood, and the men had begun to notice. This too is a part of growing up in the Viking world. A girl's worth is measured in her work, her obedience, and her potential for marriage, or trade. And sometimes that trade is her own body, bartered for alliances, cattle, or coin. Sigrid does not forget. Her blue bead feels heavier now, as if it too knows what it means to be a girl in a place where choices are not always yours to make. And yet, she continues, with her weaving, her tending, her quiet dreaming. She begins to learn the names of herbs, the ways of animals, the secrets carried by the wind. Her mother watches her with a gaze that is both proud and mournful, because she knows, soon, Sigrid will bleed for the first time. And when that happens, girlhood will end, and the world will ask more of her than ever before. The sky over the fjord is changing. Spring arrives slowly in the north, not with flowers or birdsong, but with the soft loosening of the earth and the quiet return of colour. The days grow longer, inch by inch, and the light lingers like a memory unwilling to fade. In this season of thaw and rebirth, Sigrid's body, too, begins to shift. She is 12 now, taller, her limbs lean with muscle built from years of work. Her eyes still carry the curiosity of a child, but her voice has deepened, her posture grown more still. She does not yet understand the fullness of what is to come, though she has heard the whispers. The older girls have spoken of it. The pain, the shame, the transformation. And then, one morning, it arrives. There is no trumpet, no ceremony, only the silent bloom of red upon her linens, a stain the colour of rust, of iron, of old wounds. Sigrid stares at it for a long while. She feels no pain at first, only an unfamiliar heaviness in her belly and a slow, deep ache in her back. She dresses in silence, wraps the cloth tighter, and steps into the cold morning air. Her mother notices at once. She says nothing. Instead, she motions Sigrid to follow. They walk together to the edge of the woods, where an ancient ash tree grows, gnarled and wise, its bark twisted like the folds of time. Beneath its roots lies a hollow space, marked by old stones and offerings too faded to name. Here, her mother finally speaks. "You've crossed the threshold," she says, her voice low and steady. "You are no longer a child." She hands Sigrid a bundle wrapped in wool. Inside, fresh linen, a dried herb pouch, and a simple silver pendant. A small disc etched with the symbol of Jörd, the earth goddess. It is not a grand gift, but it is hers, and it marks the moment when her girlhood ends and her womanhood begins. They sit together beneath the tree for a long while. Her mother speaks little. There are no tales of glory here, no promises of joy, only instructions: how to cleanse herself with snow and herbs, how to hide the blood from dogs and wolves, how to bear the cramps without complaint. Sigrid listens. She understands this is sacred, but also secret. It is both a power and a burden. The days that follow are strange. Her body aches in new ways. Her appetite changes. At night, she dreams more vividly of forests, of fire, of faces she does not recognize. The village women look at her differently now, a subtle shift in their gaze. She is watched more closely, spoken to more formally. One evening, an old woman named Ylva visits. She is a healer, a volva, and her presence is rare. She examines Sigrid's hands, her eyes, her tongue. She murmurs soft words, asking if the blood flowed easily, if her sleep was disturbed. Sigrid answers each question, careful not to seem weak or ignorant. Ylva nods. She has the gift of quiet fire, she says. Strong roots. Deep waters. Sigrid does not know what this means, but the words stay with her. From this moment forward, her days are filled with more responsibility. She is now expected to rise before the others, to bake the morning bread, to tend to the goats on her own. Her chores multiply. Her moments of rest vanish. She no longer joins the younger children in their play. Instead, she sits beside the loom, her fingers weaving patterns that must be perfect. She begins to understand that womanhood in this world is not marked by freedom, but by the disappearance of it. And yet, there are moments of quiet pride, when her father praises the sharpness of her kindling stacks, when her younger brother asks her to retell a story because he likes the way she makes the wolves sound, when she finishes a piece of cloth so finely woven that even her aunt nods in approval. Still, there is fear, because now she is seen by men. One day, as she returns from gathering herbs by the riverbank, a man from another village walks alongside her. He is not old, but not young either. A trader's son, broad-shouldered, eyes quick. He speaks to her with a smile too wide, his words too practiced. Sigrid replies with caution, choosing silence when unsure. She senses something behind his gaze, not unkindness, but a hunger she does not yet know how to name. She tells her mother that evening. Her mother's face grows still. She places a hand on Sigrid's shoulder and says, "You are seen now, and what is seen is sometimes taken. Be wary." These words, more than any others, stay with her. They settle in her chest like stones. Sigrid begins to move differently, her steps more deliberate, her eyes always scanning. She learns to carry her knife not just for tasks, but for safety. She listens more than she speaks, watches where others do not, and she begins to understand another truth, that being a woman in the Viking world means living with the constant presence of risk, not just from men, but from childbirth, from disease, from hunger, from the thousand small dangers that thread themselves through daily life. Yet even with this knowledge, she does not despair. Instead, she draws strength from the women around her, their resilience, their quiet wisdom, their ability to endure and create in equal measure. On the last night of her first moon cycle, her mother gives her a small piece of smoked fish, wrapped in birch bark, a gift from her own mother long ago. "This is for the path ahead," she says. Sigrid eats it slowly, watching the stars above. They flicker and shift, ancient and indifferent. She whispers to them, not a prayer, but a promise. "I will not vanish," she says. "I will be the root that holds the hill." And so her journey continues, not easier, not gentler, but deeper. As the rhythm of her moon cycle finds its quiet place within her, Sigrid's days grow longer, heavier with purpose. She is 13 now, and though the world outside her village spins on, filled with ships and sails, with gods and gold. Her world tightens around the hearth and the threshold. It is here, within the smoky beams of the longhouse, that the true weight of her role is made known. Life inside these timbered walls is a constant dance of balance. The fire must never go out, not just for warmth, but for cooking, for protection, for the spirit of the home itself. The hearth is sacred. It is where the ancestors are honored and where secrets are exchanged. Sigrid now tends the fire alone, rising before dawn to feed it with dry wood and peat, listening to the crackling embers as if they breathe with memory. Her mornings begin in silence. The house sleeps as she moves barefoot across the packed earth floor. She grinds the grain with steady hands, shaping it into dough with fingers that no longer fumble. She knows the exact moment when the skillet is ready, the subtle curl of smoke that signals it's time to place the bread upon it. By the time her family stirs, the house smells of warmth and effort, smoke, rye, and ash. No one thanks her, but she sees the way her father nods when the bread is not burned, the way her mother's back straightens slightly when the chores are done before she speaks. This is how approval lives here, in gestures, not in words. The younger children now look to Sigrid not as a sister alone, but as an example. They copy her movements, her tone, the way she slices roots with care. She begins to sense the strange duality of her place. Not quite child, not yet woman. She is old enough to be watched, young enough to be scolded, yet the demands placed upon her have shifted. No longer is she simply helping. Now she is expected. The tasks are endless. Drawing water from the well, stretching hides, turning butter, skimming fat from boiling stews. Each has its rhythm, its rules, its silent markers of success. There is little room for error. A slip of the hand can ruin a meal. A missed stitch can waste a week of spinning. The margin for mistakes in this life is slim, and forgiveness often comes too late. Her hands toughen. Her back aches. Her knees carry the memory of cold stones pressed against them as she scrubs and prepares. And yet, she does not complain. Complaints are for those with softer lives, with voices that echo in halls of comfort. Here, silence is strength. Still, there are moments, rare, fleeting, when the domestic world softens. In the early evening, when the work is done and the light slips golden across the fields, the women gather by the door to share words over simple stitching. Here, laughter emerges, soft and knowing, not loud, not careless, but the laughter of women who have endured, who find joy in small things. They talk of dreams sometimes, not the kind that reach across oceans, but the ones that stay close. A finer spindle, a better goat, a quieter husband. Sigrid listens, sometimes speaks. She learns what matters most in a life like this. Steadiness, resilience, the art of keeping peace where words might otherwise break it. It is during one of these evenings that she meets Ingrid. Ingrid is visiting, from a neighbouring village, a second cousin through her mother's side. She is 15, tall, with eyes the colour of wet stone and a voice that hums like the river in spring. She sits beside Sigrid, their hands moving in tandem through wool and thread, and speaks of things Sigrid has not heard before. Ingrid tells her of houses made of stone, of a church where men kneel to a single god, of merchants who wear silk under their fur. Sigrid listens with wide eyes, careful to keep her expression still. That night, she dreams not of goats or stoves, but of windows filled with coloured glass and towers that scrape the clouds. And yet, when she wakes, her hands return to their work. The dreams are beautiful, but they do not churn the butter or patch the roof. Still, Ingrid's voice remains in her ear, like a song half remembered. Domestic life in the Viking world is not one of idleness. The women must be not only caretakers, but managers. They control the food, the cloth, the accounts of trade. When the men are away, as they often are, it is the women who hold the village together. And this, Sigrid now learns, is its own kind of power. Her mother begins to teach her how to track inventory, how many sacks of barley remain, how much wool was dyed, which herbs have been used and must be foraged again. She learns to measure time, not by hours, but by tasks. When the stew finishes, when the smoke shifts, when the sheep begin to stir. In the back of the house, a small chest holds the family's coin and silver. Sigrid is shown how to open it, how to count without being seen. "This is your future dowry," her mother says, "but it must also feed us if hunger comes." The weight of this is not lost on her. She feels it in every coin that clinks, in every piece of cloth stored for winter. Sometimes, she longs for the freedom of the sea, the wild tales the boys speak of. But even as she dreams, she knows. Her path is not made of waves and wind. It is stitched into aprons and kindling, into ledgers and loaves. And perhaps, just perhaps, there is strength in that too. At night, when the fire burns low, Sigrid sits alone by the hearth. She watches the embers crackle, her fingers wrapped around the pendant her mother gave her. She no longer mourns the end of childhood. Instead, she prepares. She is the keeper of the home's heartbeat now. And in the silence between the flames, she finds a rhythm of her own. The wind from the fjord has turned colder again. Though summer has not yet faded, there is a sharpness in the morning air that speaks of what lies ahead. Sigrid, now 14, feels it not just in her skin, but deep within. An awareness, a shifting. Around her, the talk has changed. Where once the women spoke of cattle and cloth, now they speak of matches, of who might wed whom, of which families have land to offer, of what daughters are of age and ready. The words are never spoken directly to her. Not yet, but Sigrid hears them, lingering at the edge of conversation, like the scent of wood smoke after rain. In the north, marriage is not a matter of romance or personal choice. It is transaction and strategy, obligation and survival. A daughter, though cherished, is also currency. Her worth lies in what she can bring, not only in dowry, but in alliance, in labour, in the bearing of sons. Sigrid's mother begins to weigh her words more carefully. She speaks of lineage, of virtue, of how to hold one's shoulders and keep one's eyes low, but not weak. Her aunt reminds her to never speak first to a man unless bidden, yet always to know more than she says. These are the rules passed from woman to woman, not written, but etched into the rhythm of life. One morning, her father calls her to sit beside him at the long table. His hands are worn and broad, the veins like river paths beneath the skin. He speaks plainly. "A man may come to ask for you," he says. "He is of good standing, owns 2 boats. His father trades in amber." Sigrid says nothing. She knows the name. The man is older, by at least 10 winters. She has seen him once, perhaps twice. He did not look unkind, but nor did he look at her with interest. His eyes were always on her father, his words always of value and livestock. Her father watches her for a long moment, then nods once. He does not ask her thoughts. This too she expected. In Viking society, a woman's consent to marriage is not entirely disregarded, but neither is it central. It is a courtesy to be heard, not a right to be honoured. If the match is good, if it brings land, strength, or peace, a father would rarely decline. That evening, Sigrid sits with her mother by the fire. She asks the question that has lingered like a splinter in her thoughts. "Did you choose him?" Her mother's face remains still. The firelight dances across her features, deepening the lines beside her eyes. "I chose to live," she says softly. There is no bitterness in her tone, only honesty. And in that honesty, Sigrid begins to understand the depth of compromise a woman must carry, the weight of doing what is needed, even when it breaks the self a little each time. The following week, a feast is held. Not grand, but large enough to gather the nearby families. It is a time of harvest thanks, of trading goods and stories. And beneath the surface, a time for arrangements. Sigrid is dressed more carefully that day. Her tunic is brushed free of lint, her hair braided with a small amber bead. Her mother does not smile, but she adjusts the braid gently, and Sigrid understands this is her way of offering strength. During the feast, the man approaches. He is not crude, nor foolish. He speaks with care, offers her father a horn of mead, speaks of the sea and the harvest. When he does speak to Sigrid, it is brief, respectful. "You have your mother's quiet. That is a strength," he says. Sigrid nods. She offers the practiced smile that does not touch her eyes. That night, the talks continue. The terms are discussed in the next room, over low voices and clinking cups. Her dowry is measured. 2 goats, woven linen, a chest of salted fish, and the silver from the family hoard. Her value, turned into items and counted aloud. She lies awake, staring at the beams above her bed. Her heart does not beat fast. Instead, it feels still, heavy, like the deep waters of the fjord. She is not frightened. She is not joyful. She is suspended, caught in the waiting that only women know, when decisions are made just beyond the reach of their fingers. But Sigrid does have power, subtle, quiet, but real. The next morning she approaches her father alone. She does not beg, she does not plead. Instead, she asks a single question: "Will I be safe with him?" Her father looks at her for a long time. His face is unreadable, but something in his eyes shifts. "A man who feeds his dogs before his kin is no man at all," he says. He does not do that. He is steady. It is not affection, nor is it assurance. But in the north, that is as close to comfort as many girls receive. The match is not finalized that week. There will be more talks, more offers. Other families will make bids. But now, Sigrid is in the fold of the market, a girl considered, ready. She begins to watch the world differently. She notices which men offer their wives meat first, which women speak without glancing to their husbands for permission. She takes notes without parchment, collecting knowledge in silence. And somewhere deep inside, a thought forms. Not yet a plan, but a resolve. If she is to be traded, she will not be broken. She will bend if she must, but she will hold something back, a piece of herself untouched, unseen, a place inside where no bargain can reach. Her mother catches her watching the fields one afternoon, her eyes far away. She says nothing, only places a hand on her daughter's shoulder and leaves it there for a while. In the Viking world, love is rare, but strength, that can be found, even in the most fragile-looking girl. And so Sigrid waits, not helpless, not hopeful, prepared. The summer wanes gently, like a candle slowly lowering its flame. The leaves at the edge of the forest begin to shift in color, dull green giving way to bronze and gold. The village is busy with harvest. Grain is gathered, fruit is dried, and fish are salted in great wooden vats. Beneath the flurry of labor, quiet preparations continue for something more personal, more ceremonial. A wedding is coming, not Sigrid's, not yet, but another girl from a nearby farm, Brynhild, barely a year older, has reached her match. Word travels quickly, even without runners. Women from all around begin to stitch, prepare, and exchange news with careful eyes and folded arms. 4. Sigrid. This is more than a celebration. It is a glimpse into what may await her. She has seen the rituals before, but always from a child's distance. Now, she will witness them, not with idle curiosity, but as one standing close to the threshold of her own fate. The days leading to the wedding are filled with gathering, herbs for blessing, barley for ale, and gifts for exchange. In Viking tradition, a wedding is not merely the union of 2 hearts, but the binding of 2 families. It is a transaction of wealth, responsibility, and bloodlines. The gods too are invited, not with prayers alone, but with offerings and omens. Brynhild, is hidden away in her family's longhouse, tended to by older women. They braid her hair with bits of bone and shell, each piece a symbol: patience, courage, fertility. They bathe her with river water mixed with ash and thyme, washing away her girlhood. Her linens are replaced with new wool, never worn, the scent of dye and oak still clinging to the fibres. Sigrid assists in these quiet rituals. She passes the oil, holds the water basin, watches how the women move. She observes the way Brynhild's face shifts, sometimes serene, sometimes pale, with unspoken worry. There is joy, but there is also tension, like a bow strung too tight. Outside, the men build the ceremonial fire. Logs are stacked in a high circle, and in its centre, a space is cleared for the exchange of vows. A pig is slaughtered, its blood offered to Freya, god of fertility. The entrails are read by an elder priest, his eyes narrowed at the steaming runes of flesh. The omens are good. The fire is lit. On the day of the wedding, the sky is clear, the air cool and dry. The bride is led from her home by two women, one older, one younger, symbolizing the passage from youth to maturity. Her face is uncovered, her gaze steady. In her hand, she carries a small knife, not to harm, but to symbolize her role as keeper of the home's safety. The groom waits near the fire, flanked by his kin. He carries an axe, not sharpened for war, but polished for tradition. As the bride approaches, he places the axe at her feet. She steps over it, and thus begins the rite. Sigrid watches every detail. The silence of the crowd, the soft chanting, the flicker of flame in the bride's eyes. A cloak is wrapped around Brynhild's shoulders, the groom's family's colours, and thus she is claimed, not in cruelty, but in custom. There is no kiss, no soft words exchanged. Instead, there is ale. Horns are passed, and each drinks in turn. The joining is complete when the two clasp hands over the fire and swear their oaths aloud. They speak not of love, but of loyalty, not of dreams, but of duty. I will keep the hearth, Brynhild says. I will guard the hall, he replies. The fire snaps and hisses. Somewhere, a baby cries. The world continues, even as lives shift beneath it. Afterward, the feast begins. It is loud, warm, filled with laughter and music. Yet in one corner, Sigrid finds Brynhild seated, her plate untouched, her gaze distant. When Sigrid sits beside her, Brynhild says nothing for a while. Then softly, I thought it would feel like becoming something, but it feels more like being unwrapped. Sigrid does not know how to answer. She only offers a small smile, the kind that holds more empathy than words can carry. That night, Brynhild is taken to her new home. The village women follow, singing a slow, haunting song that speaks of beginnings and endings. They carry fire, from her family's hearth to her new one, a ritual older than memory. She steps inside with her husband, and the door closes. Sigrid remains outside for a moment longer. She looks at the stars, their light pale and ancient. Somewhere out there, far beyond the fjords and forests, others live different lives. But here, in the land of stone and ice, the steps of tradition fall like snow, quiet, steady, and nearly impossible to change. Over the next days, Sigrid begins to sense the shift in her own standing. Conversations stop when she enters a room. Her mother's voice grows more pointed. Sit straighter, she says. Speak clearly, you're nearly of age. The match spoken of before is still not confirmed, but others have begun to take notice. There are more visitors now. Men who linger after trade, who ask casual questions about her skills, her lineage. Each time, her stomach knots, not with fear, but with pressure, the slow coiling of a future unfolding before she is ready to live. She takes comfort in her routines, feeding the hens, kneading the dough, weaving beside her aunt. These things remain steady, predictable. And yet, at night, She dreams of fires not made for weddings, but for freedom. Fires lit alone in the woods, where she walks barefoot, unnamed, unclaimed, a creature of her own making. But morning always comes. And the path she walks is not hers alone. The first true frost of the season comes quietly, settling over the village like a whisper. Thin layers of ice glisten along the wooden edges of the wells, and the breath of animals turns visible in the morning air. The days grow shorter, the sun weaker, and the hearth becomes not just a source of warmth, but the very center of life. In these dim, hushed weeks, Sigrid finds herself summoned more often to the homes of women. She is no longer the youngest among them. Her hands are trusted, her silence respected. And now she begins to witness something she had only heard in murmurs and songs, the sacred and brutal passage of childbirth. It begins one morning with the call of a boy sent running from the next longhouse over. "Come quickly," he says, eyes wide. It is her time. The woman in labor is named Solveig. She is not young, not old, somewhere in the middle, with strong arms and a tired smile. This will be her third child. The previous two lived only short weeks. No one says this aloud, but it weighs in the air like smoke. Sigrid follows her mother and two other women into the house. The men are gone, sent away, as is custom. Birth is a mystery reserved for women alone. Within the walls, the fire glows. Lo, the windows shuttered to keep the warmth in. Solveig lies on a bed of straw and linen, her body already slick with sweat despite the cold outside. The vulva, old Ylva, is there too. She sits beside the labouring woman with eyes half closed, hands resting on a carved birch staff. She does not speak unless needed. Her presence is both comfort and reminder that birth walks hand in hand with death, and that neither comes without invitation. Sigrid is given tasks: heat water, fetch cloth, grind roots into paste. Her hands move swiftly, her mind sharp, but her heart beats with a strange rhythm. She has never seen pain like this. Not in battle wounds, not in sickness. This is something deeper, more primal, a pain that writhes and sings, that bends the body into shapes of agony. Solveig cries out, long and low, her hands gripping the edge of the bed frame. Her eyes dart between the women, searching for something ancient and unknowable. Sigrid watches, breath held, as the midwife speaks softly, guiding her through each contraction as though steering a boat through stormy seas. Time stretches, the fire dims. The sweat on Solveig's brow glistens like dew. And then, a cry. Not hers, but the cry of another. New, thin, high. The child is born, red and slick and impossibly small. A girl. There is no cheering, only silence, and then the slow, steady sounds of breath returning to the room. The baby is washed with warm water, wrapped in clean wool, and placed against her mother's breast. Solveig weeps, not in sorrow but in relief. Her hand finds Sigrid's and squeezes it weakly. "She lives," she whispers. It is a simple sentence, but to those present, it is sacred. Afterward, Sigrid helps clean the room. Blood is wiped from the floors. The linens are gathered and burned, a ritual to cast off the danger and invite new beginnings. Outside, the frost still clings to the grass, unaware that life has just entered the world. That night, as she sits by the hearth, Sigrid cannot sleep. The sounds replay in her mind, the gasps, the prayers, the first breath, and she understands now why women speak of birth not as miracle alone, but as trial, as passage, as war. Over the weeks that follow, more women call upon her. She is not a midwife, not yet, but her steadiness, her quiet, has not gone unnoticed. Ulva begins to ask her opinion during visits. Does the swelling look right? What colour is the mother's tongue? These are tests, not of knowledge alone, but of presence. In the Norse world, midwives are guardians. They protect more than bodies. They protect legacies, lifeblood, the thin line between sorrow and joy. A good midwife is worth more than silver. And Sigrid, though young, feels drawn to that path. Not for pride, but for something deeper. There is strength here, she realizes, not in swords or ships, but in the ability to stay when others flee, to hold life in shaking hands and not falter, to face blood and screams without turning away. One morning, Ilva shows her how to mix herbs that ease pain, raspberry leaves, ground angelica, and dried thistle root. She explains which herbs quicken the birth and which can stop it. Careful, she warns, placing a pale green leaf in her palm. This one whispers to death. Sigrid nods. She listens, remembers. These are not tales from the hearth. These are truths passed through centuries, from hand to hand. She begins to keep a small pouch of her own, not of jewelry, but of herbs and bone needles, of cloth strips and simple salves, a healer's pouch, made not for show, but for readiness. She carries it even when not called, just in case. Her mother watches, not with surprise, but with a knowing that mothers carry. One evening, as Sigrid sorts dried petals, she speaks gently. You do not have to become what I became. Sigrid looks up, brow furrowed. What did you become? Her mother pauses. Then, with a faint smile, what was needed? They say no more, but the words stay, flickering like candlelight in her thoughts. Each month, more women go to Sigrid. They ask questions. They bring her small gifts in thanks. A carved spoon, a strip of dyed linen, a cluster of dried berries. She does not ask for payment. Their trust is worth more. And in the quiet hours, she thinks not just of birth, but of choice. Perhaps she will marry. Perhaps she will bear children of her own. But perhaps too she will choose a different path. One walked in silence. In shadows, alongside pain and prayer. She is still young. But in the eyes of many, she is already more than a girl. She is becoming something else. Slowly, gently, a keeper of life, a witness to its first breath. The days grow shorter still, and with them comes the long silence of approaching winter. The fjord freezes at its edges, slow and certain, like a lid lowering over a chest. The animals grow quiet, huddling together in the stables. The firewood is stacked higher than ever, and each log is weighed not just in weight, but in worry. Will it be enough? In these solemn months, the village leans inward. Feasts are rare now. Talk becomes practical, hushed, slow, and death, once a distant figure in the warmth of summer, begins to move closer. This year, it comes quietly, as it often does. One of the fishermen does not return. He was a man of middle years, strong, always steady in the storms. His boat is, found days later, drifted ashore with nets still tangled in the water. His wife, Asa, says nothing when they bring her the news. She takes the net with both hands and walks back into her longhouse. Sigrid watches her from a distance. She has always admired Asa, not for any loud strength, but for the way she moves through the world, unshaken. Her husband was not cruel, nor particularly kind. Their marriage was of arrangement, like most. Yet she had built something solid, something lasting, and now it is gone. In Viking lands, there is no room to pause long for grief. The work must go on. The animals must be fed, the water drawn, the bread baked. But still, something changes around Asa. Her home, once filled with the thrum of men's voices and boys' feet, becomes quieter. She wears her hair differently now, loose, no longer braided for the approval of another. Sigrid visits one afternoon, sent to deliver woolen cloth. She enters the longhouse to find it almost dark, save for the hearth's soft glow. Asa is sitting alone, mending an old pair of boots. "Sit," she says, not unkindly. Sigrid does, hands folded. For a long while, neither speaks. Then Asa begins, her voice low and steady. "Grief is not a storm," she says. "It's snow. It falls and falls slowly, and at first you think it's nothing. Then you look up and realize you're buried. Sigrid says nothing, because there is nothing to say. Asa continues working, needle flashing in the firelight. I cried once, she says, just once. Then I poured that feeling into something useful, into the roof that needed patching, into the goats that needed milking. That's how I kept from freezing. Sigrid helps her with the mending that day, and the next. No words are needed. Sometimes they share a meal. Sometimes they sit in silence. Over time, Sigrid begins to understand that widows in the north are not pitied, not exactly. They are watched closely. Some remarry quickly, others not at all. Some are sought after for their land or skill. Others become shadows. But Asa refuses to vanish. She begins to take on work once done by her husband, fixing nets, bargaining with traders. She does not ask permission. She simply begins. And slowly, the village adjusts to her new shape. There is another widow in the village, though she is not called by that word. Her husband disappeared seasons ago, never declared dead, never seen again. Her name is Ragnar, and she is quieter than Asa, more withdrawn. Ragnar weaves in the evenings, her hands moving like a loom's breath. Her children have grown, and she lives alone. Sigrid visits her once, out of courtesy. She is offered tea brewed with dried mint and honey. "Do you miss him?" Sigrid asks, her voice barely audible. Ragnar looks into the steam. "Sometimes," she replies, "but I miss the girl I was, more." That answer haunts Sigrid. She begins to notice more. The lines around the eyes of women who have buried husbands, the way they walk slightly slower in winter, the way they light their fires a little earlier than others. Their strength is not loud, but neither is it hidden. It lives in the way they survive without help, in the way they do not complain. One evening, Asa takes Sigrid's hands in hers. They are rough, cracked from cold and work. "You may marry someday," she says, "or not. You may lose him, or he may lose you. Either way, learn to be your own first." Sigrid nods. These are not things taught in the weaving circle or beside the cauldron. These are lessons whispered from widow to woman, passed through grief, through years, through the long dark. The community honors death with customs, candles lit in carved stones, bowls of food left near the hearth, quiet songs sung into the wind. But mourning is personal, private. Women wear it like an extra layer beneath their wool, like a scar that cannot be seen. That winter, another man is taken, a sickness this time. His wife, Inga, is younger than Asa, and newly with child. Sigrid visits her often. She helps chop wood, stoke the fire, prepare herbs for comfort. Inga barely speaks. But one day, as they sit together, Sigrid notices a spark return to her eyes. "I dreamt of him," Inga says, "but not the man who died, the one I loved when we first wed, the one who sang to me before sleep." She smiles. It is a small, tremulous thing. Grief, Sigrid learns, does not stay the same. It changes shape. Some days, it is a cloak. Other days, a stone. And sometimes, rarely, but sometimes, it becomes something else. A seed. A song. A story. As the snow deepens and the cold hardens the earth, Sigrid finds herself drawn, not to the fire's light, but to the quiet resilience of these women, the ones who buried their futures and still kept living. She begins to write their names in her mind like beads on a cord. Asa, Ragnar, Inga. Each a chapter in a tale no scald will sing, but that shapes the world all the same. And she wonders, if one day sorrow visits her, will she wear it with such grace? Perhaps, but for now, she gathers what they offer. Strength not in defiance, but in persistence. A wisdom not shouted, but lived. And she carries it with her, like flint tucked in wool. A spark, waiting. The heart of winter settles upon the village with a silent authority. Snow covers the land in a heavy shroud, smoothing the jagged outlines of trees and rooftops until all things appear softened, but no less harsh. The world is still, and beneath that stillness lies the challenge of endurance. In this season, even time seems to slow. Sigrid wakes to darkness and sleeps within it again. Daylight is brief and pale, a ghost of summer's brightness. The chores begin and end beneath, flickering torchlight or the muted orange of the hearth. Cold bites at fingers and cheeks even within the longhouse. Every log burned, every handful of grain is counted with care. The village moves through these months like creatures burrowed under the weight of snow, quiet, conserving, cautious. Sigrid's role within the household deepens. Her skills have grown sharp, not just in weaving and tending, but in the countless small tasks that mean the difference between comfort and danger. She knows how to spot mold in stored meat, how to revive a frozen goat with hot stones wrapped in wool, how to stretch a stew with dried roots when the stores run thin. This is when the strength of a home is truly tested. Women gather not to gossip, now but to share strategies, how to mend cracked boots with fish skin, how to trap snow mice beneath overturned baskets, how to treat chilblains with goose grease. Their voices are low and thoughtful, not panicked. These are not new trials. Winter is a returning adversary, and they meet it like an old rival, with wary respect and steady preparation. Inside the longhouse, warmth becomes a kind of currency. Blankets are layered with cunning, using dry moss between hides for insulation. Stones are heated in the fire and placed beneath beds at dusk. The youngest children are bundled tightly and placed near the center of the house, close to the hearth, where the night's embers glow like ancient coals. Sigrid sleeps with her pouch of herbs tucked under her head, not for protection, but for the comfort of familiar scents. She has added dried lavender and chamomile to it this year, gifted by the healer in thanks for her help during a recent illness. These small comforts become treasures. Food is rationed with discipline. The grain stores are checked daily, each portion measured. Salted fish is soaked overnight, then cooked slowly to draw out its last goodness. The vegetables have long since been dried or pickled, their taste altered, their strength preserved. Sigrid eats without complaint. Hunger is not constant, but it lingers at the edges, a reminder not to waste. It is during these months that storytelling becomes as essential as bread. In the evenings, after the fires are stoked and the animals settled, the family gathers to speak of summers past, of old battles, of strange creatures and gods who meddle in mortal affairs. Sigrid listens, but more often she's asked to speak. Her voice is calm, steady, and people enjoy the way she unfolds a tale, slowly, with care, as if each word is a thread spun from warmth. She does not exaggerate, but paints with feeling. Her stories often begin with the ordinary. A girl walking through snow, a pot that never boils, a wind that whispers names. From there, they grow. This too is a kind of healing. The stories ease the tightness in people's hearts, distract from the endless dark, keep the soul awake. Outside, storms sometimes howl like wolves. Wind tears at the thatch, and the longhouse creaks under the weight of snow. But inside, the stories weave a different reality, one where danger is distant, where laughter still exists, where hope has not been buried under the frost. During one such storm, an old woman in the village falls ill. Her cough worsens, and the heat leaves her limbs. The healer cannot walk through the snow, so Sigrid goes, wrapped in layers, her boots tied high. She takes her pouch and steps out into the white silence. The snow reaches her knees in places. The cold steals her breath, but she moves steadily, like the women who came before her. Strong not because they were fearless, but because they kept walking. She finds the woman weak but conscious. Her lips are blue, her hands trembling. Sigrid brews willow bark in water, adds sage and honey, and feeds it to her spoonful by spoonful. She places heated stones at her feet, rewraps her in dry wool. She stays by her side until the wind fades and the woman's breathing slows. This is how life is preserved in the cold months, not by great acts, but by many small, faithful ones. Returning home, Sigrid is met with her mother's embrace, brief, strong, filled with unspoken pride. The days pass. Slowly the snow grows tired of its own weight. Icicles drip. The wind shifts. Birds begin to return, their songs tentative but sure. The sky lightens, blue appearing in slivers between the clouds. Winter is not gone, but it loosens its grip. In this slow awakening, the village breathes again, and so does Sigrid. She has not only endured, she has strengthened, not in muscle, but in bone, in breath, in knowing. She understands now that survival is not the absence of struggle. It is the mastering of it, the taming of fear into action, the reshaping of hardship into skill. She walks the village path with steadier steps, not yet grown, but no longer unsure. Spring waits beyond the horizon, but for now she wraps her cloak tighter, lights the morning fire, and prepares the first seeds for planting, because this too is what it means to live in the north, to rise again. With the snow retreating and the first rivulets of meltwater threading through the fields, the village awakens not only to labour but to reverence. Spring, though tentative, brings renewal. And with renewal comes the honouring of the unseen, those forces that shape the land, the wind, the womb, and the thread of fate itself. In the Viking world, gods do not dwell only in distant skies. They walk beside mortals in spirit and in symbol. Their presence is found in the hiss of firewood, in the curve of a wave, in the silence of a birthing room. The divine is everywhere, and women, in quiet strength, keep the sacred alive. Sigrid has grown into this truth slowly. It began as a child, watching her mother sprinkle ash at the door and mutter to Frigg for peace in the household. It continued, through girlhood, offering milk at the edge of the woods for the land spirits. Now, as she stands at the cusp of womanhood, belief lives in her hands, in how she tends the sick, in the care with which she weaves, in the reverence of her silence. Each season bears its rituals, and spring is no exception. The village prepares for a simple rite, one not of spectacle, but of continuity, a blessing for the soil. The women gather early. A cow is led to the edge of the field, not for slaughter, but for her breath, believed to warm the earth, to call forth growth. Grain from the previous year is mixed with crushed eggshells and honey, then cast into the first furrow with song. Sigrid joins the procession, carrying a basket of dried herbs. She follows behind the elders, noting how they walk with deliberate pace, heads bowed not in submission, but in respect. When they reach the field, the singing begins. The melody is old, its words worn smooth by time. There are no instruments save for the steady rhythm of hands clapping, feet stepping. The song is an offering, not to one god, but to many. To Freya, bringer of fertility. To Jord, mother of the land. To the spirits that sleep beneath the snow. Sigrid feels the cold soil beneath her fingertips as she kneels to bury a handful of herbs at the base of a tree. This, she knows, is not magic in the way skalds describe. It is something quieter, a binding of hope and history, of repetition and reverence. In the months to come, more rituals unfold. Some are grander. The midsummer fire, when men leap through flame, and women wear garlands of oak and wildflower. Others are private, a pinch of salt cast over the left shoulder after a nightmare, a braid tied with red thread to ward off illness. Sigrid learns them all, not from books, but from watching, from listening. Her mother is not a vulva, but she knows the signs. She teaches her daughter the importance of timing, which nights the veil is thin, when to stay inside, when to leave a gift beneath the birch. She tells her that the gods speak, but only to those who listen with the heart, not the ears. At first, Sigrid wonders if these teachings are mere tradition, habits carried forward out of habit alone. But one night changes that. She dreams of a woman standing at the edge of the water. The woman's hair is white, her skin the colour of bark. She holds a spindle in one hand, a blade in the other. Behind her, ravens circle in silence. She says nothing, but her gaze meets Sigrid's, and in that moment, something passes between them, not words, but knowing. When she wakes, the dream clings to her like mist. She says nothing to her mother, but carries the image with her through the day. That evening, old Ylva comes to visit. She does not sit as usual, but stands at the doorway, eyes sharp despite her age. The Norns speak more often to those who hold. Many threads, she says, then leaves. Sigrid watches her go, heart quiet but steady. She does not understand the full meaning. But she begins to pay closer attention. She learns to read the sky, not in signs of weather, but in the mood it casts. She notices the way crows behave before a visitor arrives, the way the hearth fire flickers when someone is about to fall ill. Whether these are divine whispers or simply the voice of nature, she cannot say. But she listens. Women in Viking lands are not priests, not in name, but they are keepers of belief, guardians of custom, the pulse through which reverence flows. It is they who prepare the offerings, who remember the sacred days, who sing the songs at the birthing bed and the burial mound. And belief, Sigrid realizes, is not just in gods, but in connection, to the past, to the land, to each other. On one occasion, a woman named Thora loses her child during birth. The village is silent for a day. Then the women gather. They do not speak of death, but of life, planting a tree in the child's name, weaving a small cloth to be placed in the shrine. Sigrid is the one chosen to carry the cloth. She walks, barefoot to the grove beyond the fields, and places it among the roots of an old oak. There she whispers a name, not loud, not pleading. Just enough for the gods, or perhaps the earth, to hear. This, she understands, is the heart of belief, not thunder, not miracle, but presence. The gods may be far, but the sacred is close. In the stillness of twilight, as she walks home, Sigrid runs her fingers along the edge of her pendant, the one given to her years ago, etched with the mark of Jord. It is warm from her skin. She does not wear it for protection. She wears it as a reminder that she is not alone, that the world, vast and cold as it may be, sees her, that within her, in each woman, is the echo of something old and powerful, not loud, but unyielding. As the days lengthen and the snow gives way to soft earth and fragile buds, the village exhales. Spring has taken its first real hold. The rivers run freely again, and the goats give birth in warm straw stalls. With the new season comes a subtle lightness, laughter heard more often, children's games in the thawing fields, and songs sung not in ritual but in joy. Yet even as warmth returns, not all dangers melt with the snow. The Viking world, for all its beauty and strength, is not free from threats. Some lurk beyond the forest edge, some drift with the waves, and some, perhaps most unsettling, walk quietly among neighbours. Sigrid feels it one morning as she gathers water at the riverbank. The air is bright, the birds busy with their own rituals, but a silence lingers beneath the breeze. She sees a figure near the tree line, a stranger, wrapped in a worn fur cloak, standing too still. By the time she calls out, he is gone. That evening, the village elders gather in the longhouse. News has reached them. Travellers attacked on the Northern Trail, 2 days' walk from the fjord. Not a raid, not war, just a band of desperate men. No tribe claimed responsibility. That makes it worse. Outlaws. In the north, being cast out of a community is a death sentence, or a path to violence. Some survive by theft, some by darker means. All are considered cursed. The men speak of patrols, of weapons, of warning the children, but the women listen with different ears. For them, the danger is not just swords or fire, it is being alone in the wrong moment. It is footsteps behind you on a path home. It is a stranger's gaze that lingers a beat too long. Sigrid has known these fears in soft forms, but now she feels them growing sharper. Her mother sharpens her own blade that night, not for the animals, not for tasks, but for the doorframe. She places it within reach of the hearth, quietly, without explanation. "You know how to use it," she says. Sigrid nods. The next day she walks with 2 others to gather herbs, not for healing this time, but for scenting the smoke that guards doorways. In the Viking mind, danger is not only physical. Spirits, curses, the restless dead, all are believed to move in liminal times, in places between light and shadow. The village's periphery is swept and marked. Small tokens of bone and feather are tied to trees. The children are told to stay, near home. No swimming in the deep lake. No wandering past the stone circle at dusk. And yet, life continues. This, Sigrid sees, is the North's quiet rebellion. The refusal to halt in the face of fear. Bread is still baked. Nets are still mended. Songs are still sung at dusk, though a watcher now stands at the door. Sigrid's own watchfulness sharpens. She learns to move silently between trees, to recognize tracks in the earth, to sense when birds go silent. Her father shows her how to use a sling, a simple weapon but useful. Her aim improves, not because she wishes to fight, but because she may have no choice. One evening, while helping collect kindling, she hears rustling. Not from deer, something heavier. She crouches, heart steady, fingers on the leather strap of her sling. From the thicket, a figure emerges, not an outlaw, but a boy, only slightly older than she, lost, his tunic torn. He speaks quickly, fear in his voice. His party was attacked. He fled. He has not eaten in 2 days. Sigrid does not lower her sling. "Who sent you?" she asks. "No one," he says. "I ran." She studies him. His hands shake, but not from cold. His eyes do not shift. His belt carries no weapon. She lowers the sling. That night, the boy, whose name is Eirik, is fed and given shelter. He will return home when the trail is safe. But the event becomes a story passed in whispers. How Sigrid stood her ground. How she judged rightly. How she did not let fear decide alone. And in those whispers, something changes. The village begins to look at her not just as a girl nearing womanhood or a helper by the fire, but as someone steady in uncertainty, a figure of growing trust. The dangers do not vanish. In the weeks that follow, another family reports stolen supplies. Chickens gone. Dried fish missing from a shed. No one saw who took them. No one hears footsteps. And yet, no homes are burned. No lives lost. The village is lucky, but Sigrid knows that luck is only part of it. The other part is vigilance. The dangers in this land wear many faces. Hunger, desperation, loss, and sometimes envy. But they are met not with panic, not with chaos, but with quiet resolve. That night, Sigrid and her mother walk the boundary of their land together. They carry salt and ash. At the corners, they scatter both. Old ritual. It may not stop a man, but it reminds the soul that someone is watching. As they return, her mother places a hand on her shoulder. Courage, she says, is not always striking first. Sometimes it is simply staying. Sigrid understands. In a world where dangers cannot always be seen, she will become the kind of woman others look to, not for loud protection, but for presence. And in doing so, she will weave safety not just with steel, but with certainty. The harshness of the land often draws attention to survival, to toil, to the physical burdens of life in the north. But woven into these hardships is something softer, something no less vital, the quiet comfort of companionship, especially among women. As the season steadies, the cold loosens its grip, and green returns to the world in careful shades. Life is still demanding, but not dire. In these in-between days, when breath no longer steams in the air, and the ground is firm enough to walk barefoot, the women gather differently, not always to labor, sometimes simply to be. Friendship, in the Viking world, is not spoken of often, in words. It is built in shared glances, in long silences while spinning flax, in laughter that slips through the cracks between chores. It is not always named, but it is known. Sigrid begins to see the shape of it more clearly in her own life. There is Runa, who was once just a neighbouring girl, now a daily companion. She has a quick wit and a tongue that sometimes outruns her caution, but she works hard and sings while she does it. Songs half remembered from her mother, who died last spring. Runa does not cry, but sometimes her voice falters on the same verse, every time. Sigrid learns not to ask about it. Instead, she joins in softly, steadying the melody until it carries them both. Then there is Thierry, older, married young, already mother to 2 small boys. She has little time, but always makes space for others. Her arms are strong, her hair always tied back, her face calm even in storms. Sigrid watches her and learns what it means to be patient, to be firm without being cruel. Together, the 3 of them form an unspoken circle. They share bread and secrets in equal measure. They tend to the goats together, laughing when one escapes and runs circles through the pasture. They exchange advice on herbs, on skin ailments, on how to patch a tunic without it puckering. They argue too, softly, with raised eyebrows and the occasional exasperated sigh. But they always return. It is not a bond formed from luxury or ease. It is forged in shared responsibility, in mutual understanding of what it means to carry the invisible weight that women bear. The fears never spoken in front of men, the aches never counted, the griefs never named aloud. One afternoon, while preparing wool for dyeing, Runa pricks her finger, a small thing, but the blood wells quickly and she winces more than she should. Sigrid takes her hand without speaking, wraps it in linen, and presses the palm with gentle certainty. Runa looks away, eyes blinking faster than usual. She always said to keep my fingers whole, she mutters. Sigrid does not ask who she means. She only says, "You'll still hold the thread, just fine. It is enough." Friendship among women here is made of gestures like that, of staying when one falters, of finishing another's chore without being asked, of remembering how someone likes their stew, or which flower they tuck behind their ear when no one watches. There are no declarations, no gifts with ribbons. But when Sigrid falls ill one week, nothing serious, just fever and weakness, Runa and Thyri are there before dawn. They stoke the fire, prepare tea, tend to the animals. Her mother says little, but her eyes soften in rare gratitude. Sigrid, half waking, hears the 2 of them humming as they clean the room. It is a tune she does not recognize, but somehow it feels like home. Friendship in the north is not only among the young. The elder women too share bonds deeper than the sea. Sigrid sees it in the way they lean toward one another in the evenings, heads tilted, hands folded in shared memory. They do not need to speak loudly. They have already lived enough to understand what rests beneath each silence. One day, while delivering herbs to Ylva, the Volva, Sigrid finds her seated with another elder, Gudrun, a midwife long retired. The 2 women say little. They sip broth, the steam curling into the air like slow thoughts. As Sigrid places the bundle beside them, Ylva speaks without looking up. "You're learning the right way." Sigrid nods. She understands it is a compliment. Gudrun chuckles softly. Don't teach her all the secrets yet. Let her earn a few with sore hands and sleepless nights. Wisdom never sticks to soft hands, Ylva replies. They both laugh, low and musical. Sigrid smiles. She does not feel like an outsider. She feels, just for a moment, like a thread being woven into something old and vast. Later, back home, she tells Runa about the moment. Runa grins. "They like you," she says. "They trust me," Sigrid corrects. "Same thing, isn't it?" Sigrid does not answer, but she tucks the memory away, like a pebble in her pocket. As the days stretch into summer, the bond between the women only deepens. They plant together, shoulders touching as they drop seeds into soil warmed by sun. They swim in the lake when no one watches, laughing like children, their hair streaming behind them. They share dreams in whispers, of a day with no chores, of a place where songs are sung only for joy, not work. And sometimes they sit without speaking at all, because to be seen, truly seen, by another woman who knows your rhythm, your fears, your fire, is to carry a strength that even the coldest night cannot shake. Sigrid understands now that in a world where so much is decided by men, by trade, by sword, by the fire of ambition, the friendships between women are quiet, fortresses unshakable, sacred, and utterly essential. There comes a time in every village, no matter the season, when the world slows not for weather, nor for labour, but for grief. In the north, death is a presence both feared and familiar. It is not hidden, not denied. It walks among the people, like a quiet guest, never overstaying, never hurried. And when it visits, it changes the rhythm of everything. It happens in late summer, just as the sun reaches its highest strength. The sky is clear. The fields are golden, heavy with grain. The bees move lazily between blossoms, and the breeze is sweet. And then, without warning, it shifts. An elder, Torvi, one of the oldest women in the village, passes in her sleep. She was not sick, not suffering, simply tired. Her breath slowed one night, and by morning she had joined the ancestors. Sigrid hears the news from her mother, who speaks the words as she stirs the morning stew. There is no wailing, no theatrical grief, just a deepening of silence. "She's gone," her mother says. "She left with the dawn." In the Viking world, death is both an ending and a transformation. The body ceases, but the spirit journeys. And the women, always the women, prepare that path. Sigrid has never helped prepare a body before, but now she is old enough, trusted enough. She follows her mother and two other women to Torvi's home. It is dim and warm inside, though no fire burns. The scent of pine needles, dried lavender, and smoke lingers in the air. Torvi lies on her bed, her hands folded over her chest, her expression peaceful. Sigrid's breath catches. She had seen Torvi laugh just 3 days ago, teeth bright, eyes twinkling like frost. Now, her stillness feels foreign. She has already begun the journey, says one of the women softly, and so they begin. The ritual is quiet. The body is washed with warm water, steeped in juniper and chamomile. Sigrid helps remove the elder's garments, folding them carefully. They speak to her throughout, not because they believe she hears, but because it is the way. Death should not be lonely. As they clean her, they recount small things. The time Torvi baked bread for the whole village during the hard winter. The way she sang to calm crying infants. Her stories of riding a horse across the ice when she was no older than Sigrid. It is not for ceremony alone. It is remembrance, memory as offering. Once cleansed, Torvi is dressed in her finest tunic, deep blue wool embroidered with simple but elegant spirals. Around her neck, a string of amber beads. At her waist, a knife in a leather sheath, dulled but present. Tools she may need in the next world. Sigrid braids the elder's hair. The strands are thin, silver like early frost. Her fingers move slowly, not from uncertainty, but from care. Each part of this act is sacred. The burial is to take place 2 days later. Time is needed for the word to spread, for the mound to be prepared, for the proper rites to be observed until, then, the body remains at rest in the home watched over. Sigrid takes one of the night shifts. She sits beside the body with a small lamp, the flame flickering gently. It is not frightening. It is still. She speaks softly. "Thank you," she says, "for teaching me how to thicken a stew without cream, for your stories of stars, for the way you scolded me gently when I burned the bread." No reply is needed. On the day of the funeral, the village moves with solemn purpose. The men dig the grave, not a pit, but a mound, a high place in the earth, marked by stone. Inside, a chamber is prepared with care, wood lined and furnished. The women prepare the rest, food for the journey, fabrics, trinkets, not treasures necessarily, but meaningful items. A comb, a bone needle, a small cup carved with knotwork. These are not offerings of wealth. They are tokens of life lived. At dawn, the procession begins. The body is carried by the women, only women. It is their duty and their honor. Sigrid walks beside them, holding a vessel of herbs, scattering them upon the path. The scent follows them. Sage, rosemary, and a touch of dried apple peel. Fragrant, familiar, comforting. At the mound, the songs begin. There is no single dirge. Each woman sings what she remembers. The melodies rise and fall like waves, some mournful, some sweet, some wordless. Sigrid's voice joins them, hesitant at first, then fuller. She sings of threads and fire, of snow and warmth, of the way Torvi's laugh startled birds. Then the body is lowered, gently, lovingly. The chamber is closed, stones are laid. Later that evening, a fire is lit near the mound. Not large, but steady. People sit around it, sharing bread, mead, and stories. There is laughter, there are tears, there is silence, and through it all, the presence of Torvi remains, not as a ghost, not as a fear, but as a memory fully honored. Sigrid sits beside Runa and Thyri. Their hands are linked. They say nothing for a while. Then Runa whispers, "Do you think they watch us?" Sigrid answers slowly, "I think they wait for us, in a good way." Thyri nods, and until then, we carry their songs. The fire crackles. Sigrid feels the weight of the day, the ceremony, the sacredness. But she also feels light, because now she knows something more. That to mourn is not only to weep, it is to remember, to carry forward, to make space for someone, in the rhythm of your own days. The next morning, she places a sprig of rosemary by the hearth. No words, just remembrance and the quiet promise, you are not forgotten. The hearth lies at the heart of every longhouse in the north, not just as a place of warmth, but as a center of life, where food is cooked, where stories are told, where decisions are made, and where fire is passed down like a sacred thread through generations. And around that hearth, always, move the women. Their labor is rarely sung in the old tales. The sagas speak of warriors, of sea kings and gods, of battle cries and longships slicing through storm-tossed waves. But the true engine of the Viking world is not found at sea or in swordplay. It lies in the daily, tireless work done by women, behind wooden walls. Sigrid, now nearing 17, feels this more deeply with each season. She rises earlier than she once did, well before the cocks crow. The hearth is cold when she kneels beside it. Her hands, numb with sleep, still know the rhythm. Clear the ashes, stack the kindling, coax the first flames. She breathes gently, shielding the flicker with her fingers. It is not a dramatic task, but it is vital. No fire, no warmth. No fire, no meal. No fire, no life. Once the embers glow steady, she moves through the rest of the morning, checking the bread she set to rise the night before, fetching water, milking goats if her younger cousin is late, beginning the porridge with dried fruits and cracked grain. These are not tasks done with ceremony, but each one holds the weight of survival. Around her, others stir. Her mother prepares the cloth they'll dye that day. Her aunt sets about spinning. The younger girls sweep the floors with bundled pine boughs, freshening the air. The scent of smoke, milk, and herbs fills the space like a quiet song. No one speaks much in the morning. Words are saved, preserved like winter berries. And yet, everything that must be communicated is known. A glance at an empty shelf means the cheese must be pressed today. A furrowed brow means the stew needs thickening. A gesture toward the door means a child's tunic must be mended before they go out. Sigrid often wonders how the men do not see it, this intricate living web of labour that stretches from one wall to the next. But perhaps it is not that they do not see. Perhaps they simply do not know how to name what they witness. The labour of women is not loud. It is folding a tunic in a way that keeps out cold wind. It is remembering who prefers which kind of dried meat, who cannot eat onions, who needs warm, stones placed at their feet during sleep. It is preparing a meal with herbs that soothe a mood before the mood is spoken. It is work with memory and foresight, work with intuition. Sigrid learns this not through instruction, but through absorption. She watches her mother manage the household with quiet efficiency, not a motion wasted, not a breath lost. Her mother, who never once raises her voice, yet somehow guides every action with a glance, a pause, a hum. Her mother, who can tell from the scent in the air that the linen has hung too long in the damp, who can soothe a crying baby while mending a tear and giving direction with her eyes. It is this kind of power that Sigrid begins to admire, not the kind held in titles or in bronze, but the kind that holds communities together without ever demanding recognition. One day, Sigrid spends the entire morning preparing a stew for a visiting family, 2 guests and their sons. She selects the best turnips, the thickest cut of smoked lamb, the herbs most likely to impress. She times it all to be ready just as the guests arrive. They eat, praising the balance of flavour, the softness of the root vegetables. They thank the men for their hospitality. Sigrid smiles. Quietly. She needs no praise. She only notes that the bowls are scraped clean. Still, when the guests leave, her aunt places a hand on her shoulder. "Well done," she says, with warmth in her tone. That is enough. In the quiet of the next morning, Sigrid begins to understand something else. That, while men build and break with metal, women shape the world with repetition, through hundreds of tiny acts that become the architecture of life. The clothes laid out before sunrise, the tools set in place for ease, the stories passed down in lullabies, the soft touch to a cheek in fever, the eye that notices a fraying rope before it breaks. Sigrid also begins to feel the weight of it, because this labour never ends. The fire must be relit, the bread must be kneaded, the milk must be churned, even on the days when bones ache or when grief lingers in the air like smoke. And yet, no one speaks of rest. Rest in this world is stolen, in the warmth of a corner seat at dusk, in a moment of laughter between sisters, in the scent of rosemary on one's fingers after grinding. There are no holidays from womanhood, but there are comforts, like the way Runa helps carry the water without being asked, or the way Theory sends a small parcel of dried berries when she knows Sigrid has little time to gather her own, or the way Sigrid herself, without thinking, brushes hair from her mother's forehead when she leans too long over the fire. These, too, are acts of labour, but they carry love. At night, Sigrid lies beneath her woolen blanket and stares at the wooden beams above. She wonders what her life will look like in 10 winters, if she will still live here, if her hands will still carry this rhythm, if she will grow into a mother, a matron, a keeper of others' needs. She feels no dread, only the awareness that the path before her is long, shaped not by choices alone, but by care. The burden of the hearth is not light, but it is sacred, and in bearing it, she joins the unbroken line of women who have warmed the north for centuries, not with fire alone, but with all the invisible labor that keeps the cold at bay. The value of a woman in the Viking world is not measured in coin alone. It is counted in woven cloth, in silver bracelets, in the number of cows tied to her family's name, but also in quieter ways, in her skill at preserving food through the longest winters, in her knowledge of herbs, in the steadiness of her gaze when all others falter. And yet, the dowry remains one of the clearest symbols of a woman's standing. Sigrid has known of dowries since childhood, when she first heard the quiet negotiations whispered across the hearth. She remembers sitting on the floor, pretending not to listen, while her aunt argued over whether the extra loom was part of the marriage agreement or a separate gift. Now, at 17, her own dowry is being prepared, not yet for marriage, but in readiness. It is tradition, and it is necessity. In her family's wooden chest, carved with wolves and waves, lies the beginning of her worth in goods. A bundle of fine linen woven by her own hands, 2 small knives both wrapped in wool, 3 silver arm rings passed, down from her grandmother, a comb of carved bone, and a folded red cloak dyed with madder root, a luxury in a land where most wear grey or brown. But these objects are not only possessions, they are promises. A dowry is not a gift to the groom, though many speak of it that way. It is, more truthfully, a safeguard, a protection for the bride should misfortune fall. If her husband dies or casts her out, the dowry may be returned to her. In some families, it is the only claim she will have in times of uncertainty. Sigrid's mother explains this gently without sentiment. You must not rely on love alone, she says. What you carry into your husband's house may be the only part of yourself that remains yours. Sigrid nods. She understands. In the Viking world, women may inherit property. They may manage farms. They may hold the keys to storehouses and the ledgers of trade. But this depends on many things. The favour of fathers, the structure of kin, the strength of sons. And so, a woman learns to build her future in small, deliberate steps. A basket of spun yarn, a jar of honey saved, a bolt of cloth bartered for in silence. Every item, a thread in the tapestry of her independence. Runa and Thiri speak of their dowries too, though with different tones. Runa's father is a trader. Her chest holds coins from the south, beads of coloured glass. She jokes about selling herself to the highest bidder, but Sigrid sees the edge in her laughter. She fears being chosen only for her wealth. Thiri, married at 15, never saw her dowry again. It became part of her husband's holdings. Her shawl, her tools, even her favourite comb, all now used by others. She does not complain, but her eyes are firm when she speaks to Sigrid. Keep something they don't ask for, a blade, a coin, a truth. Sigrid takes the advice to heart. She begins to set aside small things, a scrap of fine thread, a flint knife in a hollow of the wall, a few silver coins sewn into the hem of her tunic, not out of fear, but out of wisdom, because value, she knows, is not always visible. Inheritance in the north is a matter of blood and balance. Sons are favoured, yes, but daughters are not excluded. A clever woman may inherit land, especially if no brothers remain. Some women, widows or childless sisters, become powerful indeed, managing farms, trade, and oaths. Sigrid dreams sometimes of being one of those women. Not rich, not feared, but self-held, unbent. Still, she knows the more likely path: marriage, household, children, a life not her own entirely, but shaped by duty and alliance. The dowry will help. It will be her voice when she cannot speak freely, her claim in times of dispute, her memory, perhaps, if she is forgotten. And so, she works. She weaves longer hours, each length of cloth measured in future security. She sharpens her small knives. She practices keeping accounts, learning the worth of barley, of fish, of good leather. She watches her mother haggle with traders and notes every word. Knowledge, too, is part of the dowry. One morning, her father opens the chest and examines its contents. He says nothing, but later he places a pouch of salt beside her bowl at supper. For trade, he says. Salt keeps value better than silver in a storm. Sigrid meets his eyes, and for once, he smiles. That night, she adds the pouch to her chest, and slowly, gently, she begins to understand. Her worth is not just in the goods she collects, nor the name she bears, nor the man she may marry. Her worth is in what she knows, what she does, and what she holds back, wisely, quietly, just for herself. When the longships leave, they cut through the fjord like blades, sleek, fast, their sails catching wind as if filled by the gods themselves. Their carved prows rise like beasts from legend, mouths open, eyes unblinking. From the shore, they look magnificent, fierce, triumphant. But for those who remain behind, they leave not awe, but emptiness. Raiding season comes with the warmer tides. When the ice thaws and the rivers rush fast enough to carry ships to far shores, the men begin to prepare. Sigrid, now nearing the full measure of her womanhood, knows the signs, the sharpening of blades, the counting of dried rations, the hushed conversations at dusk between men too old to go and boys desperate to be chosen. The village stirs with anticipation. For many, raids are necessary. They bring back silver, tools, horses, spices, stories. But for the women, they also bring absence. They bring silence, and they bring the long stretch of waiting, filled not with drama, but with unspoken dread. Sigrid watches her father polish the fittings of his old axe. He will not go. His limbs no longer trust the waves, but her cousin Leif will, and others. Young men full of boasting, middle-aged men who feel the weight of too many mouths to feed. Even a few boys who are barely taller than their own, spears. When the ships finally depart, the entire village gathers. It is not ceremony, but tradition, a practical farewell. Women hand over bundles of dried meat, carefully packed. Mothers adjust their sons' cloaks, hiding tremors in their hands. Wives press kisses to cheeks. Daughters stand with quiet pride. Sigrid stands among them. She feels the pull of the ships, the unknown, the distant, the call of adventure, but also the pull of the land beneath her feet. She belongs to the shore, and now her task begins. With the men gone, the burden of the village does not lessen, it grows. Fields still need sowing, animals must be tended, children need raising, injuries must be mended, and all the while, the eyes of the women remain fixed on the horizon, not because they expect ships to return soon, but because they must be ready for when they do. Thyri's husband is among those who left. She does not cry. Instead, she gathers her children, tightens the house routines, and works harder. She and Sigrid take turns with tasks they once shared with men, chopping wood, lifting barrels, fixing fence lines. It is hard work, but they do not complain. One night, Sigrid finds Thyri sitting alone outside her longhouse. The children sleep inside. The moon is a sliver. The air carries the scent of pine and sea salt. He forgets, Thyri says softly, that when he leaves, I do not. Sigrid sits beside her, offering silence. It is what Thyri needs. When I married him, they said I'd gain his name, his home, his strength. But now that he's gone, no one says I hold those things. You do, Sigrid replies, voice steady. Thyri smiles, but her eyes do not. In the weeks that follow, the village becomes something different. Leaner, quieter. There is laughter still, but it is softer. Every woman begins to carry more. Young girls step into bigger shoes. Grandmothers oversee. With sharper eyes, the long house fires burn longer, the nights feel larger, and always there is the question, will they return? Sometimes they do not. Ships sink. Battles go poorly. Men are captured or killed. When that happens, no raven flies ahead to warn. No sign appears. The sea keeps its secrets until winter brings news, or fails to. Sigrid watches Runa every day, whose brother sailed with the raiders. Runa never asks aloud, but she listens to every mention of the horizon. She scans the weather for meaning. She sings more often now. Old songs, lullabies from childhood, songs that feel like wards against sorrow. Sigrid joins her when she can, and they sing together, their voices twining like threads in a braid. It is not all grief. With the men away, the women speak more freely. Decisions are made around hearths, without waiting for approval. Food is rationed with skill. Trade is negotiated with firmness. And stories are shared, of childhood, of dreams, of what it means to hold a home together when half its weight has gone to sea. Sigrid feels herself changing in these days, not only growing older, but growing fuller. She does not feel small in the absence of men. She feels necessary. In a world where the loudest stories belong to those who sail, she begins to understand that the truest strength may belong to those who stay. One evening, as the sun lingers over the hills, the sound of a horn breaks the routine, not the deep call of danger, but the long, slow signal of return. A ship. Sigrid and the others run to the shore. Their feet press into the mud, their eyes searching. The vessel appears like a shadow first, then a shape, then at last, the details. The scarred wood, the waving figures, the familiar faces. Not all are there. Some names are whispered quickly among the crowd, eyes darting. Some are met with silence, others with cries of joy. Thyri's husband returns, bloodied, thinner, but alive. Runa's brother does not. The days that follow are full of tending. Wounds are cleaned, stories are told. The raiders are welcomed with bread, with questions, with praise. But the women do not stop. Sigrid helps bind wounds, refill stores, prepare meals. She watches Runa press her brother's knife into the earth behind their house and whisper his name. She holds her hand as she does it, because for every raid there is waiting. For every hero's tale there is silence kept by those who listened for the wind. And for every return there is also loss. Yet the village continues. The women sweep the thresholds. They rethread the looms. They carry life forward, because they are not just those who remain behind. They are the ones who hold the land, the fire, the future, in hands strong with work, in hearts that know both longing and loyalty. And, in the hush between the next departure and return, they are the keepers of all that matters. In every village, there are stories not spoken loudly. Tales passed not in mead halls or over trading tables, but in soft voices around fires, behind shuttered windows, or between women's hands as they knead bread or comb wool. These are the stories of the ones who stepped beyond, women who broke the rules. Not all rebellion in the north is loud. Some wear no armor, ride no horses, raise no banners. Some rebellions begin with a choice, a refusal to marry, a secret letter passed to a foreign trader, a child named not for a father, but for a dream. Sigrid first hears such a story from her grandmother. It is a rainy day, the kind that slows time. The hearth crackles, and the smell of onion stew fills the longhouse. The younger children nap. Sigrid sits, weaving, her grandmother nearby, turning dried herbs in a bowl. "Do you know of Kari?" the old woman asks, her voice low. Sigrid shakes, her head. "She was my cousin's cousin, lived north of here. They tried to marry her off to a man twice her age, a friend of her father's. She said no." Sigrid looks up. "What happened?" "She took a boat, alone, sailed to a farmstead, where she had kin on her mother's side, worked there as a hired hand, never returned." "Was she shamed?" Her grandmother's eyes glint. "By some, not by those who knew her heart." The story stays with Sigrid, She begins to notice how many women carry stories like that, not shouted, not written, but woven into their silences. There's Fridas, a widow who never remarried despite offers. She owns her land, trades her own goods, and rides alone to market. She does not bow to men, but she never raises her voice either. It is her steadiness that earns respect. There's Astrid, once sent away to be fostered, who returned with scars and strange songs in her throat. She wears trousers instead of skirts and calls no one husband. She heals animals and people alike, and though some call her odd, none deny her skill. And then there's Ilva, the village Volva. Her rebellion is quiet, wrapped in cloth and herbs, but it is the deepest of all. She walks between the laws of men and the will of gods. She answers to no one. Yet, when she speaks, even the elders listen. Sigrid begins to wonder, what makes rebellion? Is it disobedience? Or simply living by one's own truth? For Sigrid, rules have long shaped her days. When to rise, how to cook, what to say, whom to obey. But lately, she finds herself thinking more often of what lies just beyond those rules. Not wildness, not defiance, but choice. She speaks to Runa about it one morning as they gather eggs. Do you ever wish for something different? Sigrid asks, cradling a hen in her arms. Different how? Runa replies. Sigrid shrugs. To choose your path, fully, without needing to explain it. Runa laughs softly. I dream of that every night. They say nothing more, but in the silence, a shared longing grows. The quiet rebellion takes many forms. For Sigrid, it begins with her thoughts. She no longer assumes she must marry. She no longer imagines her future only in the shapes of hearth and cradle. She begins to study herbs with deeper interest, not just for healing, but for knowledge. She asks Ilva questions others fear to speak. She listens more closely to the wind, to the stillness in animal eyes, to the dreams that visit her at dawn. She writes in secret, not words, but symbols, marks she invents to hold memory, a line for strength, a curve for sorrow, a dot for desire. She keeps them on bits of bark hidden under her bed. One day, she walks alone to the edge of the forest and places a stone beneath the ancient ash tree where her mother once brought her. I don't know what I'll become, she whispers, but it will be my own. The wind answers with a rustle, soft but steady. Still, she is careful. Not every path is safe. Not every rebellion is forgiven. When a girl named Alfhild tries to flee an arranged marriage, she is caught by her uncle, at the river's edge, brought back, bruised, married anyway. No one speaks of it openly, but the story hovers like mist. It is a warning and a wound. Sigrid weeps for Alfhild, not in front of others, but alone. And the next morning, she ties a red thread around a pine branch and whispers her name. It is not a spell. It is a promise, a memory, a thread of silent resistance. Sigrid does not seek to become a legend. She seeks to live truly. That in this world is rebellion enough. One evening, Ilva visits. She looks at Sigrid, long and quiet. You will be asked to choose soon, she says. Marriage, or the other path. Sigrid nods. Whatever you choose, Ilva says, make sure it is yours. She places a dried flower in Sigrid's hand, a pale bloom from the high cliffs where few dare climb. It grows in storms, she says. Then she leaves. Sigrid keeps the flower, not in her chest, not in her pouch, but tucked into her braid the next time she walks to market, where she goes unnoticed by most, but not by all. The moon over the fjord does not merely cast light. It watches, it listens, and on certain nights, when its face is full and silver as polished bone, it becomes something more, a witness to the old ways, a mirror to the powers that move unseen, but deeply felt. In the Viking world, magic is not a tale for children. It is part of life. embedded in soil, in flame, in the shifting of animals' eyes at twilight. And often, it is women who keep its rhythm. They do not call themselves witches, nor do they shout their gifts from hilltops, but they walk the spaces between healing and knowing, between birth and burial, between this world and the other. Sigrid has always sensed that such things were more than stories. As a child, she would lie in the grass and watch clouds move like slow beasts across the sky. She felt the pull of trees, the quiet weight of stones, the way some winds seemed to carry meaning, even if the words were not yet known. Now, nearly grown, she begins to feel these things with greater clarity. It starts with dreams. Not just the kind shaped by memory or fear, but dreams that seem older than her own thoughts. She walks paths she's never seen, hears voices that hum in languages she does not speak but somehow understands, wakes with scents in her nose, myrrh, blood, sea salt, that are nowhere in the room. She speaks of this to no one at first, until one evening, Ylva finds her alone, grinding herbs. "You're stirring too fast," the old Volva says. "You'll bruise the leaves." Sigrid slows her hand. Ylva watches her for a moment, then sits beside her. "You've had the dreams then," she says without question. Sigrid nods. Ylva smiles. Not kindly, but knowingly. They come when they're ready, not before. From that night on, Sigrid is taught more deeply, not as an apprentice, not yet, but as one being tested. She is shown how to read flame, how to listen to water, how to sense when an herb has passed its strength, and when a person's soul is not where it should be. Magic, Ylva tells her, is not what the songs describe. It is not lightning from the sky. It is not shape-shifting into bears. It is patience, attention, balance. It is knowing when to speak, and when silence is the truest incantation. Sigrid begins to carry a pouch of her own design. Inside are not just herbs, but tokens. A raven's feather, a small pebble from the river bend, a thorn from the blackberry bramble. She feels better when it is with her. Not protected, aligned. She also learns the darker truths. Magic is power, and power unsettles those who cannot hold it. Some fear women who know too much. Some call them cursed. Some blame them when cows do, not calve or when storms come out of season. Ylva has faced it all. Stones thrown at her door in winter. Men whispering slander during feast. But still, she stands. "Because," she says, "they come to me when their wives bleed too long, when their sons cough blood, when the world bends beyond their knowing." Sigrid asks, "Do you forgive them?" Ylva shrugs. "I remember them." Sigrid begins to walk at night, not far, just to the edge of the fields, sometimes to the grove where the ash tree leans over the spring. She brings no light, only herself and her breath and the stars above. She listens to the frogs, to the owls, to the quiet hush that falls just before dawn, and she feels something. Not fear, not divinity, but presence, a connection to all things, to the moss beneath her feet, to the fog that curls low and slow, to the roots buried deep under stone. She begins to dream of weaving not just cloth, but days of healing, not just wounds, but time, of songs that summon peace, not power. She does not call it magic, but others begin to. When a child is fevered, they call her. When a woman cannot sleep for grief, they ask for her tea. When a man returns from sea with haunted eyes, they send him to Sigrid, not for words, but for the way she listens. The elders begin to nod when she passes. The children mimic her quiet steps. Not everyone approves. One man, broad and sharp-eyed, mutters that she stirs trouble with her herbs, that a woman should not walk alone at dusk. That too much knowing sours a marriage. Sigrid says nothing, but that night she lights a small candle in her room, and sings the softest song she knows, not for vengeance, but to settle the air. Later, she learns the man's sheep wandered in the morning, returned muddy and unmilked. A lesson, perhaps. Perhaps not. The village continues, and beneath the surface, something shifts. Because for every woman who walks the path between worlds, there are others who watch, who remember, who wait, and who, in time, may follow. Sigrid does not yet claim a title, but when the moon is full and the fire burns low, she sits by the longhouse door, feels the night wind on her face, and knows she is part of something ancient, not chosen by gods, but woven by generations of women who knew, in their blood, in their breath, in their bones, that the world is larger than it seems, and that sometimes the truest magic is simply to be who you are, in a world that asks you not to be. Some teachings are not written. They are not spoken aloud. They are not announced with bells or recorded in stone. Instead, they pass quietly, from hand to hand, glance to glance, breath to breath, carried like embers in the folds of a dress, or like a secret tucked between the pages of a dream. This is the legacy of the silent ones, the women who speak little but say much, the women whose actions are lessons, whose stillness carries shape, whose presence is a text unto itself. Sigrid begins to understand this legacy not in a single moment, but over many, small, uneventful days that leave behind quiet traces. She sees it in her mother's way of moving, how she adjusts a wool shawl with such subtle precision that the wind finds no purchase. In her aunt's eyes, as she threads a bone needle with a thread that never tangles. In Ylva's way of pausing before answering, leaving space for the question to settle. Nothing grand, nothing loud, and yet everything essential. One morning, while grinding rye, Sigrid drops the pestle. It falls with a loud clatter, and the grains scatter across the packed earth floor. She flinches, ready for rebuke, but her grandmother only leans down, begins gathering the grain in small circular motions. No grain is wasted if we remember it, she says. Even in a mistake, there's a way to learn. It's a simple phrase, but Sigrid hears the depth in it. A teaching, without the weight of instruction. That afternoon, she helps mend a fishing net. The knots are tight, the work tedious. Her fingers ache. She begins to tie them too quickly. Gudrun, an elder known for her weaving, sits nearby. Without a word, she reaches over and takes Sigrid's hands, gently repositions them, slows her rhythm. She doesn't speak, doesn't explain, just shows, and it is enough. Sigrid comes to treasure these moments more than any formal lesson, because wisdom, she learns, is not always passed through instruction. Often it is absorbed through observation, imitation, resonance. It is in how her mother places a bowl near the fire, knowing the bread will rise better there, in how her friend Thiri sings to her baby, even when no one listens. Soft, instinctual, healing. It is in the way the women gather herbs not only for sickness, but for memory. Chamomile for calm, rosemary for courage, juniper for protection. They do not say why. They do not recite rules. They simply gather. And in watching them, Sigrid learns. One evening, while walking with Runa, they come across two children playing by the creek. Both boys, arguing over a stick shaped like a sword. Sigrid watches as the older one begins to push the younger. Runa steps forward. She does not scold, does not raise her voice. She crouches, picks up a round stone, and places it between them. This, she says, is a gate. You both stand on one side now, but if you want to cross, you must hold hands first. The boys frown. Then, slowly, they obey. Sigrid watches them cross the imaginary gate, laughing. Later, she says to Runa, "Where did you learn that?" Runa shrugs. "I think my mother did it once, or maybe my aunt. I don't remember." But she does. Somewhere the memory stayed, unspoken but present. That is how the silent ones teach, through repeated acts that root deep into the bones of the next generation. Sigrid begins to look back on her own childhood. The gestures she never understood, now revealed for what they were. The way her mother would light 2 candles before long journeys. The small cup of milk left near the door during the solstice. The crossing of her fingers 3 times before stepping into cold water. None of it explained. All of it remembered. Now she begins to do the same. She stirs her tea clockwise. She knots red thread around her herbs. She hums a certain note before dawn. Not because someone told her to, but because she carries it. The children notice. A girl named Liv, no older than 6, begins to copy her, shadowing her movements, mimicking her hand positions when picking berries, trailing behind her like a kitten. At first, Sigrid says nothing. Then one day, she hands Liv a small woven charm. "This is for safe sleep," she says. Liv nods solemnly. She holds it to her chest as if it were gold. That night, Sigrid places another by her own bedside. Not for protection, for connection. Because to pass something on is not to lose it. It is to let it echo. And as autumn begins to brush its cool fingers, along the edges of the trees, Sigrid feels the seasons shift not only in the air, but in herself. She is no longer only a girl gathering knowledge. She is becoming a vessel of it. Not to preach, not to command, but to carry. And in carrying it, to become part of the legacy herself. She begins to write small notes on scraps of hide. Not words, but symbols. A triangle with a line through it for strength. A circle within a square for rest. A spiral for guidance. She keeps them in a small pouch beside her chest. Someday, perhaps, she will pass them on. But not yet. Now she listens, watches, learns, and walks each day with the understanding that what matters most is not always seen. It is felt held-lived. The earth softens. Winter, once fierce and commanding, now shrinks back. The rivers run free again, babbling with stories carried beneath ice for months. Buds curl from branches. The goats bleat with renewed mischief. 1,000 small signs declare that the world at last is waking, and so is Sigrid. She walks the village paths, now dried of snow, boots pressing into soft soil. Children run past her, their shouts a mixture of laughter and springborn energy. The longhouse smoke rises in thinner streams. Everything smells of thaw, of wood and wool, of change. Sigrid breathes it in. This year she feels the turning of seasons, not just in the land, but in herself. As if something long buried within her has stretched, yawned, and opened its eyes. She has lived many roles: daughter, sister, healer, friend. Not all by choice, but all with care. And now she stands in the doorway of yet another becoming. She is not a girl anymore, not only because her limbs have lengthened or her gaze steadied, but because she carries a fire that no longer flickers for permission. It simply burns. The village prepares for the spring festival, a simple celebration of survival, of warmth returned. Boughs are gathered, garlands woven, loaves kneaded with the last of the winter flour, honey unsealed. The men build a small stage near the water's edge, and the women ready a procession of light. Each year, one young woman carries the ember, a glowing coal from the hearth of the oldest. Longhouse, kept alive through the darkness, passed in a stone bowl from house to house, like a heartbeat. She walks from one end of the village to the other, ending at the sacred oak, where the first spring fire is lit anew. This year, they choose Sigrid. No vote, no argument, just a quiet agreement, because all know she is ready. On the morning of the festival, the sky is the pale blue of early blossoms. Sigrid wakes before the sun. she dresses slowly, with thought. A grey tunic, simple and strong. A belt with her pouch of herbs. Around her neck, the small pendant from her mother. A disc etched with the symbol of Yord. In her braid, a single feather, black and soft, from a raven she once found by the stream. Her mother helps her adjust her cloak. "You walk for all of us," she says. "But you carry only yourself," Sigrid nods. When the time comes, the village is gathered. Children watch with wide eyes. Elders nod with faint smiles. The stone bowl is brought forth, carved with ancient runes, blackened with years of flame. Within it glows the ember, steady and small, but potent. It is placed in her hands. Warmth flows through her palms. And then she walks. Not quickly, not slowly, just with presence. Along the path that winds past the homes, through the market square, by the well, across the field where goats now nibble. Women line the way. Some nod, some smile, some simply watch. Runa stands by her family's house, fingers stained with flower dye. She presses a bloom into Sigrid's hand as she passes. No words, just a touch. Thiri stands near the edge of the pasture, a child on her hip. She lifts her chin, proud and still. Ylva waits near the oak where the fire will be kindled, her staff in one hand, her other resting over her heart. Sigrid reaches her. She kneels, lowers the bowl into the waiting pit, a cradle of dry grass, bark and tinder. She places the ember carefully, then blows, once, twice. On the third breath, the fire catches. It rises, golden and clean. The crowd watches, quiet. Sigrid stands. Around her the fire crackles. But within her, another fire has already been burning. The fire of the Viking woman, not the shield maiden of sagas, not the queen of high halls, but the real woman, the one who rises before light and sleeps after dusk, who bears children and bury brothers, who gathers herbs and guards the door, who listens to wind and prays without kneeling, who is not made of stories but of strength. Sigrid sees their faces, in the crowd, in memory, in herself, her grandmother, folding linens with hands gnarled from years, her mother, turning meat with a wooden spoon, face aglow with firelight, Runa, who dreams of freedom, and Thiri, who endures, Ylva, the guide between seen and unseen, Torvi, now buried beneath the earth, but not gone, and all the nameless ones before them, women whose lives were not written in scrolls but in soil, in smoke, in song. Sigrid is part of them, and they, part of her. The fire burns higher. Spring has come. But deeper still, something else arrives. Not new, but remembered. A truth as old as ash and bone. That women in the Viking age, often unseen, often unspoken, were never powerless. They were the tenders of flame, the shapers of memory, the breath that outlasts winter. And in Sigrid, their legacy lives on. She steps back from the fire. The ember has become a blaze. The wind shifts. And, in its rustle, the voices of countless women whisper their approval, not loudly, but with certainty.